Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we're starting a new series on the channel. It is one of mine, and I probably could have done it as a one-shot, but I decided to do it in two. It is called Explosive Notes, and this is one that some people on the original AO3 have been asking for a podfic of, and so I decided to go ahead and do it. It is rated T with no archive warnings. It is MM, and the relationship is Bakugou Katsuki and Kirishima Eijiro. It is a My Hero Academia fanfic, and the characters in this fic are Kirishima Eijiro, Bakugou Katsuki, Kaminari Denki, Ashido Mina, and Sero Hanta. The additional tags for this fic are the Baku Squad is a band, alternate universe rock band, alternate universe no quirks, punk rock, inspired by a Yellowcard song, song Only One by Yellowcard, secret relationship, drummer Bakugou Katsuki, guitarist Kirishima Eijiro, singer Kirishima Eijiro, guitarist Sero Hanta, bassist Kaminari Denki, violinist Ashido Mina, obsession, possessive Bakugou Katsuki, friends to lovers, established relationship after chapter 2, supportive Bakugou Katsuki, flustered Kirishima Eijiro, insecure Kirishima Eijiro, Baku Squad is basically Yellowcard, time skips, anxious Kirishima Eijiro, and implied sexual content. The fic is a total of 7 chapters, and it is 4,208 words. I did put some notes at the beginning, so I'm going to read those before I do this summary. So this fic came about basically while I was listening to a Yellowcard song, which I love Yellowcard. And I was thinking that Mina would be an amazing violinist. And so now every time I hear a Yellowcard song, I picture Mina playing the violin in my head. That was literally how this whole thing came to be. I ended up writing another rock band fic and didn't get to use the idea of Mina playing the violin because it was literally only Kirishima and Bakugou. So I decided to write another one where she is a violin player and they are basically Yellowcard. Also, just a fun little thing, each of the chapter titles is a Yellowcard song, and I made a link on Spotify, or a list on Spotify, that is all of the songs from this fic. So I'll probably include that in the description as well. Okay, again, this is Explosive Notes by me, Beauty and the Bookshelf. This first video will be chapters 1, 2, and 3. The second video will be chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. Here's the summary. What starts as noise in a dusty garage turns into a band, a secret, and a love neither of them is supposed to have. Between stage lights, stolen glances, and songs that say what words can't, Kirishima and Bakugou walk the fine line between keeping the rhythm and breaking all the rules. Chapter 1, Lights and Sounds. Prologue. The band didn't start as a band. It started with a drum set. Bakugou had found it on the curb a few blocks over, someone clearly tossing it out like it was nothing. He didn't hesitate, dragged it home to the garage, claiming it as his own before anyone could stop him. By the time Kirishima showed up, curious about the loud echoing through the neighborhood, Bakugou was already halfway through a rudimentary solo. "You're hitting that like the world's ending," Kirishima said, grinning against the doorway, "but it actually sounds kind of sick." Bakugou just smirked and hit harder. "Damn right it does." Within minutes, the garage was full of other noise. Kaminari appeared with a bass he barely knew how to tune. Mina arrived dragging her violin case, as if it were perfectly normal to show up for a jam session out of nowhere, and Sero leaned against the doorway with a practiced calm, guitar in hand. "Okay, but if we're doing this," Sero said, "we're doing it right, and by that I mean actually try to sound like a band instead of 5 people making a racket. It quickly became clear that no one's skills were equal, but that didn't matter. Kirishima knew just enough guitar to carry himself, and his voice was the best in the room. Mina and Sero were naturally talented thanks to years of lessons, while Kaminari learned as he went, and Bakugou drummed instinctively, powering the rhythm with every hit. Noise became rhythm, rhythm became something that sounded like music, and when Kirishima sang, shaky but honest, the garage seemed to hold its breath. By the end of the afternoon, roles had been decided almost instinctively. Kirishima on lead vocals and rhythm guitar, Bakugou on drums, Kaminari on bass, Sero on lead guitar, and Mina on violin. They even invented a few half-joking rules along the way. No food near the instruments, never leave the gear out in the rain, and, most important, no dating within the band. Mina delivered that last one lightly, as if it went without saying, and everyone nodded, chuckling, none of them thinking it would matter. By sunset, their voices were hoarse, fingers sore, and laughter raw. They had no name, hardly any talent, and no expectations, but the spark was there. In that cluttered, dusty garage, among mismatched instruments and nervous grins, they realized something dangerous and thrilling. This might actually work. Chapter 2. Rough Landing, Holly. 3 years had passed since the chaos of the garage, the dust, the mismatched instruments, and the first shaky chords. What started as chaotic jam sessions had slowly turned into something more. Friends' parties, school events, tiny backyard shows. They'd play wherever anyone would listen. Now the 5 of them had traded in cramped sunlit space for dim lights, sticky floors, and the smell of beer and sweat. Older and a little wiser, they were stepping onto real stages, bars and small venues that paid them in applause and cheap beer instead of pity claps. Their band, Explosive Notes, was quickly becoming a familiar name not only in their town, but in the neighboring cities as well. Bakugou was behind the drums, as always, arms moving like controlled fire as he kept the steady beat. Kirishima leaned into the mic, guitar slung over his shoulder, flashing a grin that could make the crowd melt. Mina's violin soared above the electric guitars, Sero shredded on lead, and Kaminari's bass thumped beneath it all, steady and unshakable despite his occasional distracted smile. By the end of the set, the crowd was cheering and clapping, and the 5 of them were already feeling the buzz of a good show. Kirishima grabbed his guitar and started gathering his other things, Mina chatting beside him as she folded up her violin case. She waved the small folded piece of paper at him again, just holding it up like a tiny, trivial gesture. "Someone left this for you at the merch table," she said lightly. Kirishima glanced down, grinning faintly. "Not interested. You can toss it." Bakugou, packing up his drum kit nearby, noticed the exchange. His sharp glare didn't leave Kirishima for a second. A flash of irritation crossed his face, subtle, controlled, but enough for Kirishima to notice. It was a small thing, almost invisible to anyone else, but it said more than words ever could. It wasn't about the note itself. Kirishima knew exactly what it was. Bakugou didn't like anyone even looking in his direction, didn't like the idea of someone thinking they could have him, even in the smallest, most harmless way, and he loved it. Loved the possessiveness that came with it, the raw heat of it that always made Kirishima's chest tighten. Before he could take another step towards the exit, Bakugou's hand was on his elbow, firm and unyielding.
"Where do you think you're going?"
The growl in his voice was low, almost dangerous, but Kirishima felt a thrill at it, leaning into the touch instead of pulling away. "Home," he said easily, smiling up at him. "Unless you want to come with me." Bakugou snorted, jaw tightening, eyes flashing.
"Damn right I'm coming with you,"
he said, stepping closer until there was no space between them. His fingers dug into Kirishima's arm, just enough to make him stumble.
"If anyone's going home with you, it's me. Got it? You're mine."
Kirishima grinned, letting his hands rest lightly on Bakugou's chest. feeling the taut strength beneath. "I know," he said softly. "You don't need to remind me." Bakugou leaned in, forehead pressed to Kirishima's, his voice rough and low.
"I'm not reminding you," he growled. "I don't get to tell anyone, so I have to make damn sure you know."
His voice low, possessive, filled with something that made Kirishima's knees go weak. Kirishima let a soft laugh escape, leaning into the pressure of Bakugou's chest, feeling the taut muscles beneath his hands. "I know," he murmured, brushing a hand over Bakugou's forearm, feeling the subtle tremor in him that always came when he got like this. "I know you've got me. Always." Bakugou didn't give him a second to breathe. He yanked Kirishima close, smashing their lips together with a force that made Kirishima's knees threaten to buckle. It was sharp, claiming, desperate, the kind of kiss that left no room for hesitation. Hands tangled in hair, fingers dug into shoulders, and every press of their bodies against each other made the air between them electric. Kirishima gasped into the kiss, stomach twisting, pulse hammering, as Bakugou's lips moved over his, rough and insistent. He clutched at Bakugou's arms, not fighting it, letting himself be pulled along, feeling the heat radiate from him like fire. Every growl, every low breath against his jaw made his chest tighten. More anticipation coiled tighter and tighter in his gut. The bar's sticky floors echoed beneath their boots, but they didn't slow. Bakugou half ran, half dragged him through the night, lips brushing teeth, noses bumping, teasing bites that made Kirishima's head spin. Kirishima pressed closer, grinning into the curve of Bakugou's neck. Bakugou's grip tightened, fingers digging into his arms as they wove through the streets. Every step, every brush of skin made the anticipation coil tighter, a delicious tension knotting in their stomachs. By the time Kirishima's apartment came into view, both of them were practically trembling with need, breathless, cheeks flushed, hearts hammering. Bakugou didn't wait. He yanked the door open, pressing Kirishima inside, and trapped him against it, forehead to forehead, lips brushing and clashing again, hands roaming possessively over shoulders and arms. The click of the lock behind them was the final spark. Suddenly the night, the bar, the streets outside didn't exist. All that remained was the heat pressing between them, the tension, the stolen kisses, the undeniable awareness that what came next would be all-consuming. Chapter 3. Believe. Kirishima woke to the faint buzz of sunlight through the blinds and the steady warmth of Bakugou pressed against him. For a moment, his brain refused to cooperate, trying to sort out if he was dreaming or if this was real. His heart stuttered as he felt the weight of Bakugou's arm draped over his side, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the soft rumble of his breathing that still carried the remnants of last night's intensity. But then the thought crept in, like it always did when they were alone, the no dating rule. The months of sneaking glances, stolen moments, hidden touches, and carefully crafted alibis. Kirishima hated lying, hated keeping secrets. And even though the memory of last night pressed against him like fire in his chest, a pang of guilt stirred, twisting in his stomach. Bakugou stirred beside him, a low groan, then a lazy shift until he was half sitting, half leaning against the pillow, eyes narrowing at Kirishima with that familiar sharp edge. With just one look, he could tell something was on his mind.
"What are you thinking about?"
he asked, voice rough and half asleep, and it made Kirishima's chest tighten. Kirishima hesitated, heart hammering. "Us," he admitted softly. I don't like keeping secrets. I hate lying, Cats, even if it's just to the band." Bakugou's expression softened, just a fraction, but his hand didn't leave Kirishima's arm.
"Does it bother you? Enough to make a big deal out of it?"
His voice was low, calm, but threaded with concern, the kind Kirishima rarely saw from him outside of moments like this. Kirishima shook his head, a small laugh escaping him despite the ache in his chest. I don't know. I guess part of me just hates that we have to hide it, but I wouldn't want to lose what we have either. He leaned closer, pressing a shoulder against Bakugou's, letting the warmth ground him. Bakugou was quiet for a long moment, his fingers curled around his hand, thumb brushing over his knuckles, careful and reassuring.
Then we don't hide,
he said finally.
Not if you don't want to.
Kirishima looked up at him, surprised. Bakugou met his gaze without flinching.
I don't care if it's the band, the crowd, or the whole damn world. If you want to tell them, we tell them.
Kirishima felt his chest ache at that, something warm and overwhelming blooming behind his ribs. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to Bakugou's collarbone. You serious? Bakugou huffed, brushing his thumb over Kirishima's knuckles.
When am I not?
Kirishima smiled, stomach twisting with a familiar mix of fire and tenderness he always felt with Bakugou. He rested his head against his chest, letting the quiet settle between them, hearts beating in rhythm. For now, the outside world could wait. For now, this, messy and complicated though it might be, was enough. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for these first 3 chapters of Explosive Notes. I hope that you enjoyed this so far. I also wrote a little note at the end of chapter 3 that if I wrote Smutty Fix, there would have been a really nice spot for one, like a smutty chapter right there, but I am not confident in my smut writing abilities, so we don't get any of that. All right, so I hope that you will come back and join me for the next video of Explosive Notes. That one will be the finale, or like the last one. I'm going to do it in 2 parts, like I said in the beginning, and we'll wrap this story up really fast. All right, if you come back and join me for the next video, then I'll see you next time.